The roar of failing engines filled the cockpit as salt spray lashed the windshield 800 miles from any shore. Static crackled over the radio. "This is Echo November 1st. I have the yoke. Autopilot's dead. Everybody stay strapped." That's not a request. Before you watch the full story, comment below, which country are you watching from? And don't forget to subscribe because tomorrow's story might be even bigger. Sarah Klein sat 3 rows back in the cramped 8-seater charter plane, the kind rich researchers use to hop between remote Pacific stations. She looked exactly like what she pretended to be. A quiet 32-year-old with messy brown hair, plain gray hoodie, and a backpack at her feet that held nothing special. Just a notebook, some snacks, and a half-drunk bottle of water she kept sipping. The 2 oceanographers up front in crisp polo shirts and the pilot didn't even glance her way. "You doing okay back there, sweetie?" The co-pilot called over his shoulder, voice dripping with that unconscious baby talk adults use on civilians. "These little bumps are normal out here. Nothing to worry your head about." Sarah gave a small smile and nodded, twisting the cap back on her water bottle. Inside her jacket pocket, her fingers brushed the cracked leather cover of her grandfather's old flight logbook, the one thing she always carried. It felt like just a sentimental diary to anyone who noticed it. But as the plane droned on through clear skies, a memory surfaced unbidden. Her grandfather's gravel voice in the old hangar years ago, hands guiding hers on the controls of a battered Cessna. "The instruments lie when the storm wants them to, kid. But the hands remember." He'd said it quietly that day, almost to himself. Those words had stayed with her. The cabin smelled of recycled air and coffee. The lead oceanographer, Dr. Harlan, laughed too loud at some joke about grant proposals while the skeptical co-pilot kept checking his tablet. Nobody noticed the faint vibration Sarah felt through her seat, like a toothache starting in the airframe. She glanced out the window at the endless blue below, spotting a strange shimmer on the horizon that looked like heat haze, but shouldn't be there at this altitude. Everyone else was busy being experts. Then stage 1 hit, a small hesitation in the left engine, barely audible. The pilot frowned. Stage 2 widened the crack, a warning light flickered on the panel, and an odd transmission cut through comms, garbled coordinates that didn't match their route. "What the hell is that?" Harlan muttered. By stage 3, the pilot was declaring it out loud. "Mayday, Mayday, Echo November 1st. Engine 2 failing, position 800 miles west of the nearest strip." Alarms blared. The plane began a shallow descent toward waves that looked close enough to touch. "Stay with me here, because what happens next is the part nobody saw coming." The co-pilot was already pale, hands shaking as he tried to troubleshoot. "Would you have broken cover to save strangers, even if it cost you everything?" Sarah's breath caught. She unclipped her belt and moved forward, voice steady but quiet. "I can help?" The co-pilot laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "Lady, sit down. This isn't a simulator game." Harlan turned, eyes narrowing. "We're professionals here. The captain has this." Even the pilot, sweating now, waved her off without looking. "Back to your seat, miss." She didn't argue. Instead, she leaned in and pointed at the panel. "Crossfeed valve 2 is jammed. Standard procedure on this model is to cycle the boost pump twice, then manually isolate. Your altitude's dropping because you're losing manifold pressure on the good engine too." It was a small, specific demonstration. Words only someone who'd logged hundreds of hours in similar birds would know. The pilot's head snapped around. Silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then the co-pilot tried it. The engine note steadied slightly. "How did you—" The anchoring logbook was in her hand now, no longer just a memento, but the key to the numbers she'd been calculating in her head. She opened it to a dog-eared page, filled with her grandfather's precise handwriting, margins crowded with fuel burn rates and emergency glide formulas. It wasn't ordinary anymore. It was the bridge. Nobody was dismissing her, now. The pilot's hands trembled on the yoke as he nodded once. Sarah slid into the right seat, voice calm but her own fingers shaking as she took the controls. "I have the aircraft. Throttle back to 60%, trim for best glide. We're going to run the checklist slow, real slow. The ocean stretched below like black glass. She talked them through it step by step. Real procedural language flowing. Confirm fuel remaining at 1.2 hours. Initiate descent at 500 feet per minute to conserve. Watch for carb ice on the remaining engine. Apply heat in 30-second bursts. The plane bucked hard as a secondary failure hit. Hydraulics groaning, the yoke fighting her like a living thing. For one terrifying beat, the nose dropped too far, spray kicking up visible through the windshield. Someone behind her gasped. Sarah's stomach lurched, but her hands stayed firm, adjusting trim tabs with muscle memory older than her own doubts. In the middle of it all came an unexpected beat of humanity. The co-pilot, voice cracking, reached over and squeezed her shoulder once. "My kid's on the mainland waiting," he whispered. Sarah just nodded, eyes never leaving the horizon. "Mine flew these same routes. We'll make it." The prophetic words echoed back in her mind as the waves rose. The hands remember. She guided them into a controlled ditching, the final approach agonizingly slow, flaps full, gear up, nose up just enough. Impact slammed through the fuselage like a freight train, metal screaming but holding. Water rushed in, but not catastrophically. The plane settled, bobbing wounded on the swells. Hands shook everywhere. Harlan was crying quietly in the back. The co-pilot slumped forward before catching himself. Silence hung for 10 long seconds before the pilot spoke first. Voice raw. "You saved us." The skeptic. Harlan cleared his throat. "I was wrong. I thought you were just baggage." The pilot turned fully, unclipping his harness to offer a formal salute, crisp despite the chaos. "Captain Reyes, ma'am, on behalf of this crew and passengers, thank you." That was textbook. Better than textbook. An official transmission crackled back from the distant rescue coordination. "Echo, November 1st. Rescue assets en route." Ground teams confirmed civilian pilot with verified legacy quals just pulled off one hell of a save. Later, in the debrief on the carrier deck, Sarah reunited briefly with her own mentor, her grandfather's old flying partner who'd flown out with the response team. He pulled her into a rough hug. The logbook now passed between them like a living thing once more. Weeks later, life had quietly changed. Sarah no longer hid in the back of planes. She took a new role training young pilots at a small coastal academy, her days filled with the smell of jet fuel and salt air. One quiet evening on the hangar porch, her mentor sat beside her, watching the sunset. He closed the logbook gently and said, "You didn't just remember the hands. You became the reason the sky still trusts some of us."